There was a specific weight to a toy from the 90s, not the plastic, the anticipation. The smell of new rubber and paint the second the cardboard gave way. Nobody talks about the smell. Today, a toy comes in recyclable packaging and connects to an app. Back then, it just existed, completely, and with absolutely no regard for your safety. And we loved every single one of them. There's one toy on this list pulled from shelves mid-season, not for low sales, but for a reason the company chose very carefully not to explain publicly. We'll get there. A toy aisle in 1996 was its own ecosystem, every box competing for your attention with colors that have no place in nature. You'd stand there with your parent for 20 minutes, not asking, negotiating. You'd done the math before you even left the house. You had a primary target, a backup, and a concession offer ready in case things went sideways at the register. Every 90s kid was a negotiator before they knew the word. The toy aisle taught us that. And the toy itself was almost never the point. The 2 weeks of imagining what you'd do with it, that was always the better part. The toy aisle taught us desire before we knew what desire cost. That's not nothing. Let's talk about what was actually on those shelves. Creepy crawlers, a toy oven sold to 8-year-olds. Third-degree burns were part of the experience. Sky dancers, a spinning projectile launched at face level, marketed as magical, functioned as a weapon. Moon shoes, promised bouncing, delivered ankle damage. Tamagotchi, a digital pet that died if you forgot it for 4 hours. The grief was real. The guilt was real, and the story behind it, along with Furby and The Sims, is a whole separate rabbit hole I already went down. Worth the detour. And gack. Nobody can explain gack. It had a smell and a texture that existed nowhere else in nature. Parents hated it, which was the entire point. Kids today get toys with safety certifications. We got a plastic oven at 350 degrees. And we remember it more clearly than anything that came after. Every kid who owned a Stretch Armstrong wanted to know one thing: what was inside. You could stretch it to 4 times its size and it would, slowly, impossibly, return to its original shape. The mystery became its own mythology. Kids had theories: rubber bands, special gel, alien technology. The answer, when someone finally cut one open: corn syrup. Reduced, gelled corn syrup. The same base ingredient your grandmother uses in pecan pie. And somehow, knowing that makes you love it more, because it still worked. Still felt like magic. The simplest possible answer, and none of us guessed it. The magic of a 90s toy was never the technology. It was the fact that you couldn't stop thinking about it. Stretch Armstrong figured that out with corn syrup and latex. That's the whole trick. Here's what made these toys different from everything that came after. They were imperfect. A modern toy works exactly as advertised, every time. A 90s toy failed in ways that became stories. The piece that never fit right. The battery cover that required a specific technique. The manual translated from a language that didn't quite exist. Nobody who had one would trade the memory of it. The imperfection was the experience. You weren't just playing, you were solving. That stubborn, patient engagement was baked into everything from this era. And there's one toy where that imperfection crossed a line, pulled from shelves in a matter of weeks, with a company statement so carefully worded it told you almost nothing. That story is coming. The Moon Shoes commercial showed kids bouncing. Not slightly elevated jumping, actual bouncing. Effortless, joyful, gravity-defying bouncing. What the commercial didn't show was that Moon Shoes were plastic platforms strapped to your feet with elastic bands. You did bounce, a little, choppily, loudly, with a strong chance of rolling your ankle the moment you landed off center. You wobbled, you grabbed a wall, you fell sideways and learned something important about the gap between marketing and reality. And yet, every kid who got a pair wore them until the elastic gave out. Because the commercial was in your head, and the commercial showed you flying. The actual shoe was irrelevant. You were chasing the version you'd already imagined. That's not a moon shoes problem. That's the whole story of being a kid in the 90s. The thing was never as good as the wanting of it, and we kept wanting anyway. Before we get to the one that was actually pulled from shelves, drop the toy you remember most clearly in the comments. Not the most popular one, yours. And if this is your corner of the internet, subscribe. There's a lot more coming. Here's what the 90s toy industry understood that the modern industry has abandoned. A toy doesn't need to be easy. It needs to be compelling. The creepy crawler's oven required patience. You waited while something took shape in a machine that could genuinely hurt you. And the slightly lopsided rubber bug you got at the end, that was yours. You made it. The imperfection was proof. Compare that to a toy that arrives pre-assembled and optimized for unboxing footage. One of those is a product. The other was an experience. And that brings us to the one I promised. The toy that was pulled mid-season with a voluntary withdrawal so quietly handled that most people who owned one never heard about it. The Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kids doll launched in the fall of 1996 with one selling point: a motorized mouth that actually chewed. No on/off switch, no way to stop it once it started. What Mattel hadn't tested for was hair entanglement. By early December, reports were coming in. By early January, the number had reached around 100. Hair pulled into the mechanism, fingers caught, at least one parent who had to use scissors to free her child. On January 6, 1997, Mattel voluntarily pulled all 500,000 units and offered a $40 refund. Here's the detail that doesn't make it into most tellings. Both Mattel's own testing and the CPSC's independent investigation found no serious safety hazard. Mattel pulled it anyway. No extended explanation. Fewer than 2% of those dolls were ever returned. That's how a lot of things ended in the 90s. Not with a clear answer, just with a statement, a refund number, and an empty shelf where something used to be. Here's what we don't say out loud. We weren't just playing, we were practicing. Patience, because the creepy crawler's oven didn't rush for anyone. Curiosity, because Stretch Armstrong made you need to understand something before you could let it go. Desire, because wanting something for 2 weeks taught you what wanting actually feels like. Modern toys remove all friction, nothing to wait for, build, or earn. And a toy that does everything for you teaches you very little about yourself. These toys were imperfect, occasionally dangerous, sometimes inexplicably gone. They were also the first things that were completely ours. There was one toy you saved up for, not asked for, saved for, counted coins for. Watched the number go down week by week until the day it hit 0. You remember exactly what it felt like to walk into that store with your own money, where it sat on the shelf, the weight of it in your hands before you even got it home. That feeling is not available for next-day delivery. It never has been. Nothing has replaced the feeling of something you actually waited for. That's not nostalgia. That's just true. Most of these toys are gone now. Not just discontinued, absorbed, rebranded, quietly erased by companies that no longer exist in the form that made them. You can find them on eBay, in storage boxes at a parent's house, in the precise memory of adults who can still describe the packaging texture from 30 years ago. That's evidence that something real happened there. And honestly, the lopsided rubber bug from the creepy crawler's oven that came out wrong the first 3 times? That might be the one you remember clearest of all. These toys weren't designed to be perfect. They were designed to be played with, fully, physically, sometimes dangerously. And the generation that grew up with them got used to things being hard, to things not working on the first try, to figuring it out anyway. Because if the toys taught us patience, the games made it a survival skill. I already made a video on exactly that. The Nintendo Thumb epidemic, the Lion King monkey level, and how 90s game design was engineered to break you and make you love it. If this one hit somewhere familiar, that one goes further. It's right there.